Unaware she inherited 20 billion after her hidden trillionaire mother passed away. Husband deserts his pregnant wife carrying twins to wed his affluent boss. What transpired at the estate reading afterward left him trembling. He didn't depart quietly. He didn't even exit like a spouse. He abandoned her like a man attempting to make a statement right there at a family and corporate gathering with spectators observing and devices already lifted while his expectant wife stood near the entrance still clutching her medical bag. Marcus Bennett seized the microphone intended for a celebration, gazed past Elena as though she wasn't even present, and declared loud enough for the entire room to register, "I'm initiating divorce proceedings. Effective this moment, she's a burden." The space tilted into stillness. Someone inhaled sharply. Someone else began filming. Nobody intervened. At the periphery of the assembly, Elena Rodriguez, 29, 8 months expectant with twins, maintained one palm pressed against her abdomen as if she could protect two tiny souls from the degradation crashing upon her. Her expression remained composed, but her gaze revealed the devastation. She dressed in a modest outfit, no accessories, nothing suggesting anything significant. To them, she was merely Marcus's gentle wife, the woman who couldn't comprehend pressure, the one they murmured was a weight. And positioned beside Marcus was Victoria Sterling, his prosperous boss, the woman he'd soon discreetly marry. Flawless appearance, flawless expression, hand positioned on his shoulder as if she'd already occupied Elena's position. Adjacent, Marcus's mother observed with satisfaction, as though this public decimation was necessary. What none of them grasped, what even Elena didn't grasp, was what her mother's passing had already initiated days prior. A legal apparatus moving silently in the background. A will, a trust, a sealed correspondence meant for Elena, a figure so enormous it didn't seem legitimate. In private finance communities, people had once remarked that Catherine was the trillion-dollar phantom because the investment framework she quietly managed moved capital measured in trillions. Even though her personal holdings, carefully segregated, sat at only $20 billion, but the correspondence that should have informed Elena of everything never reached her possession because someone inside that residence had seized it. And unknown to them, someone outside that residence, an investigator Catherine had arranged in advance, was already observing, camera prepared, from a dark vehicle across the avenue. So, while Marcus was busy labeling her dead weight and transforming her anguish into a public spectacle, a different reality was racing toward them, one that would conclude in a silent chamber full of attorneys, an estate reading, and a statement that would make Marcus's hands begin to tremble. This isn't merely a narrative about a husband selecting a wealthy boss over his pregnant wife. It's about what transpires when a man discards a woman he never truly comprehended right before the world discovers who she really is. Dear viewers, thank you for being present. If you observe without subscribing, it's like standing in that assembly while Elena is eliminated. When you press that button, you stand with every woman who was ridiculed, deserted, and still discovered a way to ascend. Please subscribe and inform me in the comments where you're viewing from. The notification struck like a blow to the torso. Elena Rodriguez, 29, 8 months expectant with twins, froze with her hand on a tiny garment. The material stretched between her fingers as if it might tear if she breathed incorrectly. The voice on the device was courteous, trained, too composed for what it was conveying. "Miss Rodriguez, I'm deeply sorry. This is Dr. Chen from Memorial Bridges. Your mother, Catherine Monroe, she passed away early this morning." For a moment the space didn't feel genuine. The surfaces looked too stable. The atmosphere looked too ordinary. Elena's stomach contracted. Twins shifting as if they sensed her devastation before she could identify it. She attempted to rise, but her knees didn't trust her. She lowered herself to the edge of the mattress, gaze fixed on the open compartment of baby garments, as if organizing and arranging could prevent life from transforming. Catherine was gone, not ill, not improving. Suddenly gone. Elena pressed the device to her ear, said thank you because people said thank you on devices even when their universe had just fractured. The connection went silent and she sat there staring at her own image in the dark display. She considered calling her husband immediately. Of course she did. That's what spouses did, wasn't it? They reached for the person they trusted most. So she went to locate Marcus Bennett. Marcus was 33. Tall, angular features, always dressed as if he was being observed. He worked under a powerful executive, his superior Victoria Sterling, a wealthy woman with a reputation for transforming people into stepping stones. Marcus desired her validation the way some men desired oxygen. When Elena walked into the living space, Marcus was already halfway inside his device, thumb moving rapidly, expression tight with concentration. He didn't notice her tears initially. My mom, she stated. The words emerged small. My mom passed away. Marcus blinked once as though he'd heard a sound he didn't comprehend. Then he exhaled slow and irritated. Not openly harsh. Not yet. But the irritation was there, like a warning indication. Elena, now, he stated, gaze dropping back to the display. I have significant matters happening. The quarterly assessment is next week. Victoria requires these figures. Significant matters happening. That's what he labeled his life these days. She waited for the embrace, the hand on her shoulder, the simple human gesture. He gave her none of it. Are you certain? He asked, not in concern, more like he desired the information to be incorrect so it wouldn't interrupt his day. Elena nodded. She could feel the twins shifting again. Her body reacting to distress with a dull pain that spread across her lower spine. Marcus didn't see it, or he saw it and chose not to. Okay, he stated quickly. We'll manage it. Contact whoever you need to contact. I can't miss this call with Victoria. Manage it. That phrase had become his favorite instrument. Like her grief was a package he didn't want to handle. Elena swallowed because she didn't want to plead for tenderness. She had learned long ago that pleading only made proud people colder, so she nodded as if she was fine because she was skilled at that. Elena hadn't grown up fantasizing about wealth. She hadn't grown up even knowing what genuine wealth resembled. Catherine Monroe raised her in modest rentals with second-hand furnishings that was always clean and books that were always newer than their garments. Catherine never wore flashy accessories, never discussed success like other parents did. She discussed choices, about security, about discretion. When Elena was a teenager, she once inquired why they relocated residences so frequently, and why her mother never used the same bank twice. Catherine had paused while stirring a pot on the burner, gazed distant as if she was listening to a memory. People care for you for what they think you need, Catherine stated, voice soft but firm. And they resent you for what they think you possess. Elena didn't comprehend then. She only comprehended that her mother kept locked compartments and private correspondence and a composed expression that never fully opened. Sometimes late at night, Catherine would sit at the surface with stacks of paper, legal-looking forms, crisp envelopes, signatures. When Elena walked in, Catherine would slide the papers under a cookbook as if it was the most normal thing in the universe. Just grown-up matters, she'd state. Once Elena caught a glimpse of a name on a document, Rodriguez Global Trust, and inquired if it belonged to family. Catherine smiled as if she was hiding a secret inside her teeth. A long narrative, she stated. One you don't need to carry yet. That was Catherine's way. She believed freedom was quiet and security was silence. What Elena never knew, couldn't have known, was that Catherine's grown-up matters wasn't small. Behind Catherine's plain life was a web of private trusts, silent partnerships, and holdings hidden behind legal barriers so strong most people didn't even know they existed. Catherine didn't run around calling herself a trillionaire. But the funds and portfolios she had influence over through Rodriguez Global Trust and other vehicles, controlled capital measured in trillions. People in certain boardrooms called her the trillion-dollar phantom. Her personal holdings, though, had been deliberately capped and structured, $10 billion, locked behind conditions and protections. Catherine didn't want a daughter who expected power. She wanted a daughter who deserved it. So she kept Elena unaware on purpose. And Elena, trusting her mother, never pushed. She married Marcus because he seemed hungry for life, and she believed hunger meant ambition, not danger. She supported his aspirations. She made herself smaller when his ego needed space. She told herself love was patience, love was compromise, love was staying. Now she sat on the edge of her mattress with Catherine gone. Realizing her mother had been her only true protection, whether she comprehended it or not, Elena went back to the nursery corner. No fancy theme, no expensive decoration, just clean shelves and neatly stacked diapers. She picked up the tiny garment again and organized it with steady hands that didn't match the shaking inside her torso. She planned which compartment would hold which twin because if she stopped moving, she might fall apart. Her body ached in that deep private way pregnancy creates. Every breath felt like work. She didn't complain. She never did. Marcus once joked to his friends that she was low maintenance and they laughed as if it was a compliment. He never comprehended that Elena had simply learned how to carry weight without asking for applause. She believed marriage was built quietly. She believed loyalty was a daily choice. She believed love didn't need witnesses. Marcus moved through the residence like a man already gone, checking his device, adjusting his watch, glancing at his image in the window as if he was practicing being important. Elena watched him and felt a strange distance growing, like the space between two people who used to share one life. She mentioned her mother again later, voice softer. I should go through her belongings, she stated. I don't even know where she kept her papers. Marcus gave a short exhale. You and your small-town nostalgia, he muttered, half smiling as if her grief was a habit that annoyed him. Just do what you have to do. I have a corporate event coming up. It's important. Victoria's expecting results. An event important. Elena didn't ask who would be there. She didn't ask why his device never left his hand. She didn't ask why his patience kept diminishing. Because she desired peace. Because she thought peace could save love. On a shelf in Elena's bedroom sat a small, outdated device, never charged properly, never thrown away. It had been Catherine's. Years ago, Catherine had pressed it into her hand. Keep this charged just in case, she'd stated. If there's ever something important about me that you need to know, they'll call this number. Elena had meant to plug it in. Life got busy. She upgraded her own device. The old one became a sentimental object instead of the emergency line Catherine wanted it to be. Once Elena tried to give it to Marcus to recycle. He laughed. Why keep junk? Elena kept it anyway. She didn't know why. She only knew it felt wrong to let it go. That night, Elena finally fell asleep with one hand resting over her abdomen as if she could shield the twins from the universe simply by touching them. Marcus lay beside her, awake. His device lit up. A message appeared from Victoria Sterling, his wealthy superior, the woman whose validation he chased like a lifeline. It read, "We need to discuss your wife." Marcus's expression tightened, his thumb hovered over the display, and somewhere in the quiet machinery of Catherine's hidden life. The first sealed correspondence from her holdings had already been sent out, headed toward the marital address Elena still thought was safe. The first thing Elena noticed was Marcus's grip, not on her hand, on his device. He held it like a secret, thumb hovering, gaze darting down whenever it buzzed. And when Elena asked softly if he was okay, Marcus's smile came too quickly, too clean. He stated he was fine, but his voice carried that thin edge that meant don't ask again because something had shifted after that message last night. We need to discuss your wife. Elena didn't know the name attached to it. She didn't know the tone of power behind it. She only knew Marcus had gone quiet in a way that felt planned. That evening he dressed like a man walking into a new life. This is important, he told her while adjusting his jacket in the mirror. It's a corporate fundraiser and networking night. Appearances matter. Just don't embarrass me, okay? Don't embarrass him. Elena's expression stayed composed, but inside something pressed against her ribs. She was expectant with twins, carrying 2 heartbeats and still being spoken to like a risk. But she nodded anyway because her whole life had trained her to keep peace even when it cost her dignity. She chose a simple dress, clean, soft, comfortable, no glitter, no loudness. She wasn't trying to compete. She wasn't trying to be seen. She only wanted to stand beside her husband and feel like they were still a team. But the moment they walked in, Elena comprehended. This space was not built for teams. It was built for winners. People wore confidence like perfume. Laughter was practiced. Smiles were weapons. Cameras were everywhere. Small ones, device ones, hidden ones, angled the way they always angled toward status. And right there in the center of it was Victoria Sterling. Victoria Sterling was 38, Marcus's superior, and the kind of wealthy executive who didn't need to brag because the space already bragged for her. She had the composed posture of someone who'd never been told no in a way that mattered. Her role wasn't just superior. She controlled Marcus's career path, his promotions, his reputation, his hunger, and Marcus, starving for validation, treated her approval as if it was proof he was finally becoming someone. Victoria never rushed. She didn't need to. She stood exactly where cameras naturally angled toward her. Champagne glass untouched, expression composed. Power didn't shout from her. It settled, heavy and quiet, as if it owned the atmosphere. When Marcus arrived with Elena, Victoria's gaze flicked to Elena the way people check labels. First, the dress simple, clean, no designer logo begging to be admired. Then Elena's body expectant, heavy with twins, moving slower. Victoria's smile didn't widen. It sharpened. Victoria greeted Marcus first. Marcus, she stated warmly. Professionally, like a woman offering him a future. Her hand touched his arm just a half-second too long. Marcus straightened as if her fingers had plugged him into electricity. Then Victoria turned to Elena. Her gaze traveled over Elena's expression with a pleasant, observing look, as if Elena was a resume someone had already decided not to read. So this is her, Victoria stated. Not a question, not curiosity, a conclusion. Elena offered her hand because that was what decent people did. Victoria looked at the hand and let a beat of silence pass just long enough for the message to land. Then Victoria's gaze slipped to the chair beside Marcus, Elena's chair, and Victoria sat there. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was surgical. For a fraction of a second, Marcus hesitated. Elena saw at the twitch of uncertainty the flicker of should I. Before ambition crushed it, Marcus let it happen. He didn't offer Elena his seat. He didn't state, "That's my wife's place." He simply turned toward Victoria, smiling as if he'd been chosen. Elena stood. A few people noticed. A few people pretended not to. Someone whispered to someone else. Devices angled slightly upward, displays glowing, ready to capture humiliation like entertainment. Elena felt heat rise into her expression, but she kept her posture steady. She could do steady. She had done steady her whole life. Victoria leaned toward Marcus and stated something low, something that made him laugh. Elena didn't hear the words, but she heard the meaning. You don't belong where power sits. Conversations moved like rivers around Elena. People spoke over her, around her, through her as if she was glass. When she tried to add a small comment, something polite, safe, Marcus cut her off with a tight smile. You wouldn't comprehend this part, he stated, voice carrying just enough to sting. It wasn't a shout. It didn't need to be. It was the kind of humiliation that made people question if they were imagining it. Victoria watched, enjoyed. Her gaze held Elena the way hunters hold prey. Composed, patient, certain. Later, as executives discussed budgets and streamlining, Victoria casually dropped words like audits and cash flow with the ease of a woman who knew how to make figures sound like morality. Sometimes, Victoria stated, liabilities disguise themselves as loyalty. Her gaze landed on Elena's abdomen when she stated it. Elena's hand instinctively pressed to her belly, protective. Two small kicks answered as if the twins were reminding her she wasn't alone. Marcus didn't notice, or he noticed and didn't care. Dinner was announced. People flowed toward surfaces with assigned seats. Elena assumed she'd be guided to sit beside her husband, but a young assistant approached with a polite smile that wasn't really polite. Ma'am, she stated softly, could you stand here for a moment? We're adjusting seating for senior staff and partners. Stand here. Not as positioned. Elena looked toward Marcus. Surely he would speak up now. Surely he would state, that's my wife. Marcus didn't even turn. Victoria did. Victoria's gaze stated everything Marcus wouldn't. See, even he knows where you belong. Elena stood with the assistant while plates were placed for everyone else. She watched laughter spill across surfaces, watched Marcus lean toward Victoria, watched the space beside him remain empty like a statement. No one defended her. Silence became complicity. Later, Victoria raised her glass. The space quieted. Devices lifted slightly. Attention gathered around her like gravity. To clarity, Victoria stated, to efficiency, and to the courage to let go of what no longer serves growth. People murmured. Approval. Smiles. Clinks of glass. Victoria's gaze never left Elena. Marcus clapped first. Elena didn't. Her fingers curled at her side, steady on the outside, trembling underneath. It wasn't just jealousy she felt. It was recognition. Recognition of something her mother once warned her about, how certain people could look at you and decide you were disposable. As the night ended, Marcus walked ahead of Elena, already absorbed in conversation, already moving as if she wasn't attached to him. Victoria drifted close, passing Elena with the scent of expensive confidence. She brushed by as if it was an accident, then murmured almost kindly, almost like advice. Motherhood makes women smaller. You'll see. Elena's breath caught. Not fear, recognition. Because in that moment she comprehended Victoria wasn't just flirting with Marcus. Victoria was studying Elena, planning around her. And Marcus, her husband, was letting it happen. When they got residence, Marcus didn't ask if Elena was okay. He went straight to his device. Elena stood in the entrance, watching him type with the urgency of a man protecting something precious. Then she saw the display light up again. Victoria's name. Another message. Short, cold, a command, not a conversation. Tomorrow I'll come by the residence. We'll handle this properly. Marcus's jaw tightened, and for the first time he looked at Elena not like a wife, but like a problem he had to solve. And somewhere deep in Elena's memory, her mother's voice rose like a warning she had ignored for too long. People resent you for what they think you possess. Elena didn't know it yet, but the next day would not be about work. It would be about erasing her. And as she turned off the bedroom light, she noticed Marcus had locked his device with a new password, as if he was preparing for a war she didn't even know had begun. The papers were already waiting for her, spread across the kitchen surface like a verdict. Elena stepped in and stopped so hard her breath caught. For one sharp second, her mind refused to name what she was seeing. Printed statements, highlighted lines, a folder stamped with the corporate logo, and Victoria Sterling standing in her residence as if she owned the surfaces. Victoria, 38, Marcus's wealthy superior, leaned against the counter with composed gaze and perfect posture, as if she had simply walked into the wrong residence and decided to stay. She held a slim tablet at her side, expression smooth, mouth relaxed, no guilt, no apology, just control. And next to the papers sat Diana Bennett, Marcus's mother, early 60s, sharp-faced, dressed as if she was attending a courtroom. Diana wasn't a visitor in this marriage. She was a judge who believed she had the right to sentence people. Marcus paced behind them, device in hand, jaw tight. He didn't look at Elena the way a husband looks at a wife. He looked at her as if she was a problem that had finally become official. Elena's twins shifted, a slow roll inside her abdomen. Her body knew something was wrong before her mind could catch up. "What is this?" she asked, voice thin but steady. No one answered her directly because the accusations didn't arrive as questions. They arrived as conclusions. Diana tapped a page with one fingernail, lips pressed in a kind of moral satisfaction. "She's been siphoning capital," Diana stated as if she was reading out loud from a script she had rehearsed. "Small amounts from the joint account, enough to hide, enough to make Marcus look irresponsible at work." Elena stared at the page. Her name was printed there. Her address, figures that looked like they belonged to her life, but the account number didn't. The pattern didn't. The transfer descriptions didn't sound like anything she'd done. Her throat tightened. She tried to speak, to ask Marcus to look closely, to use his own gaze for once. But Marcus's gaze slid past her and landed on Victoria as if her approval mattered more than truth. "You stated HR flagged this," Marcus stated to Victoria, voice low and urgent. Victoria gave a small nod, almost bored. "I stated finance flagged irregular personal transfers that create exposure," she corrected smoothly. "I brought you the internal template so you'd comprehend the seriousness. If this escalates, HR will have to get involved." She stated it as if it was official, as if she was doing them a favor by handling it informally at their kitchen surface. Elena's skin went cold. Victoria wasn't just here as a woman. She was here wrapped in the language of a system, spreadsheets, logos, internal review, exposure. And in Marcus's mind, that meant she had the right to define reality. Elena took a careful step forward. "This isn't," Diana cut her off without even looking at her. "Stop. Don't embarrass yourself." "Embarrass yourself?" Elena blinked, stunned by how quickly the space had turned into a place where her voice didn't count. Marcus finally turned to her, gaze sharp with something worse than anger, disgust, as if believing she could defend herself was offensive. "I carried you," he stated. "You were nothing before me. You don't even comprehend how accounts work. And now look." The words landed like a strike, even though his hand didn't move. Elena felt her expression heat, then go numb. Nothing before him. She wanted to laugh because she had been a whole person before she ever met Marcus. But she didn't laugh. She couldn't. Her throat was full. Victoria watched, arms folded now, expression composed. She looked almost satisfied, as if this was the moment she had been arranging since the fundraiser. Quietly, carefully, like a chess player moving pieces into place. Elena reached toward the papers, needing to hold them to prove to herself she wasn't imagining the wrongness. Marcus knocked the stack from the surface with a sharp sweep of his hand. Pages fluttered to the floor like wounded birds. "Don't touch," he snapped. "You'll contaminate them. We need them as evidence." Contaminate? As if she was dirty, as if she was the crime. Elena's hands froze in the atmosphere. She felt every gaze on her. Diana's cold stare, Victoria's composed gaze, Marcus's anger. Even the kitchen itself felt as if it had taken sides. Diana stood and moved closer, voice lowering into something that pretended to be concern. "Pregnancy makes women unstable," she stated as if she was warning Marcus about a dangerous animal. "We warned him." Elena's heart thumped hard. "We warned him," as if this had been discussed. As if this moment had been planned between them, somewhere behind her back while she was organizing baby garments and believing in marriage. Victoria nodded one small silent agreement. Elena slowly crouched to pick up the fallen pages. Her spine protested, twins pressing low, but she forced herself to move carefully. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of panic. As she gathered the papers, her gaze caught something small, a formatting error, a tiny detail most people wouldn't notice. The spacing of the header, the way the audit summary aligned with the margins. Elena had seen that exact template before on Marcus's laptop when he worked late on the department documents he left open. That template came from Victoria's department, not from a neutral HR system. Elena didn't state it out loud. Not yet. The atmosphere wasn't safe for truth right now. Truth would be shouted down, so she memorized it. The way the font sat, the way the highlight color looked, the way the internal review language was written. If she survived this moment, she would need every detail. Marcus's voice rose again. I trusted you, he stated, too loud, too performative. He desired this to be a scene where he looked righteous. And this is what you do while I'm working, while I'm trying to build a future. Elena looked up at him from the floor, papers in her hands. A future? He stated it as if she wasn't carrying it inside her body. Victoria stepped closer, heels quiet on the tile, and spoke in a voice designed to sound reasonable. Marcus, she stated gently, as if she was calming a child. We'll do this properly. Documentation process. Boundaries. You can't have someone creating this kind of instability at residence. Boundaries. Elena's abdomen tightened. The twins kicked harder now, restless. She breathed through it, refusing to show pain. Diana's mouth curled. She's a burden, she stated, not caring anymore. Always has been. Marcus didn't argue. That was the loudest part. Elena stood slowly, one hand braced on the surface. Her gaze moved from Diana to Victoria to Marcus. She desired to ask, when did you decide I was the enemy? But she already knew the answer. They had decided the moment she became vulnerable. That night, after the residence finally went quiet, Elena sat alone with her device in her hands. Marcus had gone into the bedroom without speaking to her, as if he had already filed her under resolved. Elena tried to check the joint account just to breathe, just to reassure herself that she could still buy diapers, still buy medicine, still protect the twins if Marcus kept escalating. The display loaded, then one line appeared. Account closed by authorized user. Her torso went hollow. Before she could move, her device buzzed again. An unknown number this time. One message, no name. It's over. Don't make this harder. The wording was Marcus's. The lack of name was deliberate. Elena stared at the words until they blurred. And somewhere behind the silence of the residence, she heard Marcus's voice in the hallway, low and urgent, as if speaking to someone who mattered more than she did. Tomorrow, it sounded as if they planned to make this official in front of people. The microphone squealed, sharp and ugly, and the whole space flinched. Elena Rodriguez froze mid-step, her breath catching as if she'd been pushed underwater. Her heart slammed once hard as Marcus Bennett lifted the mic that was supposed to be used for a celebration. The assembly went quiet the way assemblies do when they sense blood in the water. Devices already half raised, gaze bright with the thrill of witnessing someone else's life collapse. They called it a celebration dinner, part family gathering, part work event. Marcus's colleagues, Victoria's circle, a few relatives, enough people to make humiliation feel official. Marcus stood tall, shoulders squared, wearing the expression of a man who believed he was finally in control. He didn't glance at Elena first. He looked straight ahead as if she wasn't even part of the conversation. I'm filing for divorce, he stated, effective immediately. A pause, gasps, a few nervous laughs that died quickly when no one joined in. Elena's abdomen tightened, twins shifting low, reacting to the devastation moving through her body. She felt the space tilt as if the floor had been built on lies, and someone had just kicked the support beams out. Marcus's voice grew louder, more confident, as if he was feeding off the silence. She's a liability financially, emotionally, professionally. I can't let her drag me down anymore. Liability, not wife, not mother of his children. Liability. And right beside him stood Victoria Sterling, his wealthy superior, the woman who had been physically present in every step of this unraveling. Victoria's hand rested on Marcus's shoulder, not quite an embrace, more like ownership. Her smile was small, controlled, satisfied. Behind them sat Diana Bennett, lips curled in approval as if she'd been waiting for this announcement the way some people wait for dessert. Elena's ears rang. Her mind reached for logic. This can't be happening like this. Not here. Not in front of everyone. But Marcus was doing it here because that was the point. Public humiliation wasn't a mistake for him. It was a display. Elena took a step forward. She didn't desire to fight. She desired to comprehend. She desired to state, I'm carrying your children. She desired to state, you don't have to do this. But before she could even open her mouth, 2 security guards moved into her path. Event security, not personal bodyguards, just men in matching polo shirts hired for safety that evening. Expressions blanked the way expressions get when they're paid to obey. One of them lifted a hand slightly, not touching her, just blocking her like a barrier. Ma'am, he stated quietly, you need to step back. Mr. Bennet asked that speeches not be interrupted. Step back. Elena looked past him at Marcus. Her gaze begged without asking. Marcus didn't move. That was when she comprehended the cruelest thing. Orders had already been given. This wasn't a decision made in the moment. This was arranged, coordinated, planned. A burst of laughter erupted from someone near the back. Too loud, too uncomfortable. Then whispers, then the hum of recording devices. The assembly had turned into an audience. Diana's voice floated from her seat, sweet and sharp at the same time. "Don't cause a scene, Elena," she stated, as if Marcus wasn't the one holding a microphone like a weapon. Victoria leaned toward Marcus and murmured something. Elena couldn't hear the words, but Marcus's expression tightened with satisfaction. He was being guided like a puppet that thought it was a king. Elena tried again to move forward. Security shifted with her. Victoria didn't look away. She didn't need to. She knew Elena had nowhere to go inside that space. Then Marcus lowered the microphone and spoke without it. Voice still loud enough to carry. "You're done," he stated, gaze cold. "You're not embarrassing me anymore." Embarrassing him. Elena's throat burned. She forced a breath in slowly, trying to keep her twins composed. Her hands trembled at her sides, but she didn't raise them. She refused to look desperate in front of people who were hungry for it. That's when the first suitcase landed outside. A heavy thud. Then another. Someone had opened the front entrance. Someone had gone upstairs. Someone had grabbed Elena's belongings as if they were trash and thrown them onto the lawn. The sound of the suitcases hitting the ground was strangely loud. Final like punctuation. Elena's legs moved before her mind caught up. She turned and walked toward the entrance. Not fast, not panic because she couldn't afford to fall. Not like this. Not expectant. Not in front of them. Outside, the atmosphere felt colder than it should have. Her suitcases sat on the grass like evidence she didn't belong inside anymore. And there, near the entrance, stood Victoria, wearing Elena's robe. Not a similar robe, not a new one. Elena recognized the small loose thread at the sleeve she had sewn it herself 2 weeks ago while Marcus was on a work call. At some point, while Elena had been kept at the entrance by security, Victoria had slipped upstairs, changed, and walked back out as if the residence already belonged to her. Victoria adjusted the robe belt slowly, gaze glittering with composed cruelty. "So this is where we'll live," she stated lightly, looking around as if the residence had already changed owners. Elena stared. For a second, her mind went blank, not because she was weak but because the boldness of it was unreal. This wasn't just betrayal. This was replacement. Victoria wasn't stealing a man quietly. She was stepping into Elena's life and trying it on like a dress. Behind her, people stepped outside to watch neighbors, guests, corporate allies with nice shoes and curious expressions. Some pretended to be concerned. Some didn't bother pretending. Devices were up now, fully up. The humiliation wasn't accidental. It was being documented. Elena's medical bag was still inside. The one with her prenatal records, her vitamins, the emergency numbers her doctor insisted she keep. Her hand went to her abdomen again, twins rolling, unsettled. "I need my bag," she stated, voice trembling now despite her effort. "My medical bag." Marcus walked out behind Victoria as if he belonged to her shadow. He looked at Elena as if she was asking for luxury instead of basic care. "What now?" he snapped. "You always overreact." "Overreact?" Elena's gaze widened. "I'm expectant," she stated, the words coming out sharper than she meant. "With your children." Marcus's mouth tightened. He stepped closer and his hands shot out, grabbing her arm hard enough to make her gasp. "You're not my problem anymore," he stated through his teeth. Elena tried to pull back. Pain flashed through her arm, then down her side. She clutched her belly instinctively. The strike came fast, a sharp crack that echoed through the yard. Elena's head turned with the force of it. For a second she saw stars, then silence. Total silence. No one screamed. No one moved. No one stepped forward. Devices kept recording. One woman near the back flinched and half-stepped forward, but Diana's hand closed around her wrist and pulled her back with a quiet, "It's domestic. Don't interfere." Victoria didn't flinch. She simply watched, gaze steady, as if this was a lesson being taught in public. Diana's voice drifted from the entrance, pleased and composed. "She brought this on herself," she stated, as if she was describing a mess on the floor. Elena's cheek burned. Tears filled her gaze, but she refused to let them fall in front of them. She tasted metal blood from where she'd bitten the inside of her mouth. She looked at Marcus one last time, waiting for something. Regret, hesitation, a flicker of humanity. There was nothing. That was the moment her heart stopped trying to save the marriage. She bent down slowly, barefoot in the grass, lifting one suitcase at a time. Every movement hurt. Her belly felt heavy, low, dangerous, but she kept moving because stopping meant collapsing. A car engine hummed softly across the avenue. Elena's gaze lifted. A black vehicle idled there, parked just far enough to be unnoticed by most people. Inside, someone sat very still, watching the scene as if it mattered. Elena didn't recognize the expression through the glass. But the feeling that hit her was immediate and strange, as if she was being observed by someone who knew more about her life than she did. Someone connected somehow to Catherine's careful, hidden universe. The man in the vehicle lifted his device, not to gossip, but to record. Angles steady and professional, as if following instructions. And as Elena slid into her car, shaking, she didn't see Victoria's satisfied smile fade for the first time, just for a second, as if Victoria had noticed the vehicle too and didn't like it. Somewhere, a sealed holdings correspondence addressed to Elena had already been delivered to this residence and signed for by another hand, and someone inside was ready to make sure she never touched it. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. Victoria Sterling held it between two fingers as if it might stain her skin, standing alone by the living space fireplace as the residence finally emptied of guests and noise. The robe tied around her waist, Elena's robe still carried the faint smell of laundry soap and something softer, something domestic. Victoria ignored that. She ignored everything that wasn't useful. The envelope was thick, sealed, official, the kind of correspondence that didn't come often. It had arrived earlier that afternoon by courier while Elena was getting ready upstairs and Marcus was out front pretending to manage caterers. The doorbell had rung. Victoria had opened it as if it was already her residence. She had signed the electronic pad with a practiced flourish. The courier hadn't questioned her. Now hours later, she turned the envelope over under the lamplight. On the front, printed neatly in black ink, was to Miss Elena Rodriguez regarding holdings of the late Catherine Monroe. Victoria's gaze narrowed. Marcus had stated Elena's mother was simple, small town, nothing special. Marcus had stated it like a fact, as if he'd lived the woman's life himself. But Victoria had learned long ago that men like Marcus repeated whatever made them feel superior. They didn't verify. They didn't investigate. They just believed what fed their ego. Victoria ran a fingernail over the seal. She didn't need a knife. She didn't need permission. She had walked into Elena's residence as if she belonged. She had watched Marcus strike an expectant woman in public and felt no fear. That meant the residence was already hers, at least in Marcus's mind. So she opened the envelope. Her gaze moved quickly over the first page, scanning for figures, for names, for anything that explained why the paper looked so expensive, why the language felt so careful. Then her breath paused. Not a gasp, Victoria didn't gasp, but something inside her tightened, sharp and unfamiliar. There were words she recognized immediately. Trust, executive, beneficiary. And there was another name printed like the center of the universe. Elena Rodriguez. Victoria's mouth went dry. For half a second, she stood completely still, listening to the quiet of the residence. Marcus was in another space on the device again, probably enjoying the feeling of being free, probably believing he had just upgraded his life. Victoria didn't share his excitement. Excitement was for people who didn't comprehend risk. She read faster. The correspondence wasn't a full breakdown. Not yet. It was a notification, a formal notice that the law firm representing the Rodriguez Global Trust had attempted contact, that Catherine Monroe's holdings process was moving forward, that the intended recipient, Elena Rodriguez, needed to respond in order to unlock further instructions. Victoria's gaze flicked down and caught the law firm name at the bottom. Not a small neighborhood office. Not the kind of place that handled ordinary wills. A serious firm with an international reputation. The kind of firm that served clients whose capital quietly shaped markets. Victoria's thoughts sharpened, cold and quick. What if Catherine Monroe wasn't who Marcus stated she was? What if Elena wasn't who he thought she was? And what happens if Elena finds out after what we just did to her? She glanced toward the hallway. Marcus would ruin this if he knew. Marcus would panic. Marcus would talk too much. Marcus would make calls, plead, expose himself. And if Elena had something bigger behind her, Marcus's pleading could bring attention. Attention was dangerous. Victoria stared at the correspondence again, then at the fire. The fire was already burning, slow and steady, throwing orange light across the surfaces as if it didn't care what it consumed. Victoria hesitated only 1 second. Then she fed the pages into the flames. The paper curled, blackened, cracked. If that's genuine, she murmured, voice low, almost composed. She'll never discover. Ash lifted into the atmosphere. A small part of her watched the fire with something close to satisfaction. Not because she enjoyed cruelty but because she enjoyed control. Knowledge was power. And taking knowledge away from someone else, that was the cleanest kind of power there was. Behind her, the floor creaked. Victoria turned. Marcus stood there loosening his tie, looking pleased with himself as if he had just won a competition. "What's that?" he asked, nodding at the flames. Victoria's expression didn't change. "Junk correspondence," she stated smoothly. "Probably sympathy correspondences from some law office. You know how people get after someone passes." Marcus shrugged as if it didn't matter. "Good. I don't want her getting emotional again. We need this clean." "Emotional again?" Victoria studied him for a beat. This man who had struck his expectant wife and called her a liability, then complained about her feelings as if they were an inconvenience. He was useful, but he was also weak, and weak men were easy to replace. Elena sat in her car with her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold her keys. Her cheek throbbed where Marcus had hit her. Her arm ached where he grabbed her. The twins pressed low as if trying to hide inside her. She didn't drive yet. She couldn't because the silence after public humiliation was louder than the humiliation itself. It left room for thoughts to attack. How did he become this? Or was he always this? And I just refused to see it. Elena wiped her expression with the back of her hand and stared at the residence she'd believed was home. Then she remembered Catherine's old device, the outdated device Elena had kept for years on a bedroom shelf, the one Marcus called junk. She grabbed it instinctively when she packed in panic, as if her hands knew it mattered, even when her mind didn't. Elena dug through her bag until she felt it cool and dead at the bottom. She pressed the power button. Nothing. She plugged it into the car charger, waited, pressed again, whispering, "Come on please." The display blinked, then slowly it lit up. A single voicemail notification appeared. One unheard message. Elena's breath caught. The time-stamp made her abdomen drop days ago, right after her mother went into the hospital. Her thumb hovered. The time-stamp made her abdomen drop days ago, right after her mother went into the hospital from a law firm. Elena stared at the display as if it might explain itself. Why would a law firm call this number? Why would they leave a message weeks ago? Why didn't I know? Her thumb moved to press play. The display froze. The device went still in her hand. Elena's pulse pounded in her ears loud enough to drown out everything else. She hit the button again. Nothing. Just that frozen display, that trapped message as if the truth was right there. And something time, neglect, or someone else's interference had already started trying to keep it from her. Across the avenue, the black vehicle idled quietly. And as Elena stared at the frozen voicemail, she didn't see the shadow inside the car lift a device of their own, not to gossip, but to report in a low voice that the subject has left the residence. Escalation confirmed somewhere. The next message from that law firm was already being queued, and Elena was about to learn how fast lies can become official when you don't know what you're entitled to. The voicemail finally played like a door cracking open, then slamming the whole universe into place. Elena had to wait for it. She was still in the driver's seat, the old device warm in her palm, battery just alive enough now. Earlier, when she tried to listen, the display had frozen and left the message trapped. Now, with the device finally awake, that old message from the law firm began to play. She pressed play. The voice on the recording was composed, professional, the kind of composed that felt almost harsh when your life was falling apart. "This message is for Miss Elena Rodriguez. My name is Mr. Harrison Mitchell. I'm calling from the law firm representing the holdings of Catherine Monroe." Elena's throat tightened. Holdings representing. The word sounded like a language meant for other people. The message continued. "We've activated the holdings process in line with Miss Monroe's instructions. We've attempted to reach you on file several times. A sealed notification correspondence has been delivered to your marital address and signed for. It's important you contact us as soon as possible to acknowledge receipt and discuss next steps as beneficiary. Again, this is Harrison Mitchell calling. Beneficiary." The word hung in the atmosphere like a foreign object. Elena didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even move. She sat in her car, device pressed to her ear long after the message ended, listening to the silence where truth had been waiting for weeks while she was being pushed out of her own life like trash. Her cheeks still throbbed, her arms still ached. The twins shifted inside her as if they were restless, as if they could feel their mother's body turning cold with comprehension. Someone had taken her correspondence. Someone had made sure she stayed unaware. And suddenly, the fireplace, the robe, Victoria inside the residence, the junk correspondence, the way Marcus let everything happen. It lined up too neatly to be coincidence. Elena stared at the dark windshield. Her mother's voice floated up from memory, soft and warning. Freedom is quiet. And Elena realized something that made her abdomen drop again. Catherine hadn't just lived quietly. Catherine had prepared quietly. Prepared for exactly this kind of cruelty. Elena reached up and wiped her expression once, more from habit than emotion. Her gaze was dry but her breathing was sharp. Every breath felt as if it had to fight its way through devastation. She glanced at the old device, the outdated one. Catherine once told her to keep charged just in case someone important needed to reach you about me. Elena didn't comprehend how much her mother had hidden. Not yet. But she comprehended this. If a lawyer was calling her beneficiary and discussing sealed correspondences, then Catherine's small life had been a lie meant to protect her, and Victoria Sterling had just burned a part of that protection to ash. Elena's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She could either collapse under this or she could learn how to move like her mother moved. Quiet, careful, unseen until it was too late. She didn't drive to a shelter. She didn't drive to a friend's couch. She drove to an address Catherine once gave her on a small card years ago, tucked inside a plain envelope. Catherine had stated, "Only if you ever need it." Elena had laughed then a little. Need what? Catherine's gaze had stayed serious. Need to be believed. The office building wasn't flashy. No glass sculptures, no marble fountains, just 4 floors of brick and a simple plaque by the entrance. Mitchell Legal Group. Elena's abdomen clenched as she stepped out. The twins made her feel heavy, slow. Her body desired rest. Her mind refused it. Inside, the waiting space smelled like paper and clean atmosphere. Not warmth, not comfort, just professionalism. A woman looked up from behind the front desk. Then she truly looked, gaze narrowing the way people's gaze do when they recognize an expression they were expecting. She stood immediately, expression changing from neutral to focused. Elena, the woman stated softly as if she already knew her. Rachel Foster was in her early 40s, a family and holdings protection lawyer. She didn't have the fake sweetness of people who pretended to care. She had the controlled composure of someone who dealt with betrayal for a living. Catherine had trusted her. That alone made her different. Rachel's role wasn't just legal paperwork. She was a strategic anchor. The person who could turn pain into a plan. Rachel came around the desk and took in the whole picture fast. Bruised cheek, swelling around the arm, pregnancy strain. The way Elena held herself like a person trying not to fall apart. I wondered how long it would take, Rachel stated gently. Your mother was very specific. Elena's throat tightened. My mom, she started. Rachel held up a hand not to silence her, but to steady her. I know, Rachel stated. Let's sit. If you start feeling dizzy, we pause and call your OB. No heroics. That practical concern loosened something in Elena's torso. For the first time that day, someone was treating her like a human being. Not a problem or a prop. They moved into a private office. Rachel offered water, tissues, a seat with armrests. Elena sat, hands resting over her belly. She didn't talk like a dramatic victim. She spoke in facts because facts were safer than feelings right now. She told Rachel about the fundraiser, the chair, the standing with assistant, the audit papers in the kitchen, Marcus's mother, the strike, the suitcases thrown out, the frozen voicemail, the mention of a sealed correspondence signed for by someone else. Rachel's gaze didn't widen. She didn't gasp. She simply listened, and the stillness in her expression told Elena something powerful. This wasn't unbelievable here. This was recognizable. When Elena finished, Rachel leaned back and stated quietly, "Okay, we move clean. We move once. Your mother knew these people were capable of this. That's why we're here." That statement felt like oxygen. Rachel tapped her desk device. "Thomas," she stated, "I need you in my office." Thomas Wright was a private investigator in his late 30s, the kind of man who spoke softly because he didn't need volume. His role was proof. Genuine proof, not gossip, not feelings, evidence that could stand up in court and in public. He arrived within the hour carrying a slim folder and a camera bag. When Elena saw him, something clicked. He had the same composed stillness as the man in the vehicle. "I've already been watching the residents," he stated, voice low, gaze sharp. "Your mother asked me to be on standby once she updated her will. She didn't desire to interfere in your marriage, but she didn't trust your husband's ambition." On standby, Elena's pulse jumped. Her mother really had prepared. Thomas spread photographs across the surface. Victoria entering the residence. Victoria taking correspondence from the courier. Victoria leaving with a stack of correspondences. Victoria standing by the fireplace. Paper in her hand. Flames reflecting in the glass. Elena's breath caught again. She could almost smell the imagined smoke. Could almost hear Victoria's quiet voice from earlier. "If that's genuine, she'll never discover." Rachel didn't react emotionally. She reacted strategically. "We'll need financial proof too," she stated. Sophie Parker was a forensic accountant in her mid-30s, precise and quick, with gaze that looked like they could read lies off paper. Her role was figures tracking transfers, templates, timestamps, and digital footprints, transforming manipulation into undeniable evidence. She joined them that same afternoon via secure video, then in person 2 days later, laptop open, already inside a web of statements and logs. The audit file accusing Elena of siphoning capital. Sophie stated that template is a copy from Sterling Strategic Finance, not HR. Metadata shows it was created on a workstation in Victoria Sterling's division, then exported and printed. The timing lines up with Marcus's recent complaints. Elena's fingers curled. She'd noticed the template mismatch earlier, but hearing it confirmed made her feel something new. Not hope, power. Rachel slid a stack of papers toward Elena. Divorce papers, not dramatic, not revenge-fueled, clean, controlled. "This is step 1, Rachel stated. "We file. We ask for protective orders. We put the joint assets and the babies under court protection. Then we coordinate with the holdings lawyers. Your mother's trust team will be fully involved now that there's evidence of interference with holdings correspondence." Elena stared at the papers. Marcus had tried to erase her. Now she was signing herself into a new reality. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked up the pen. Then she steadied it. For the first time since the expulsion, Elena's voice came out firm. "They desired me silent," she stated. "Let's show them what they missed." Rachel nodded once. Thomas gathered the photographs. Sophie saved the files. The space wasn't full of pity. It was full of quiet weapons. Thomas paused at the entrance, hand on the knob as if debating whether to state the next part. "There's something else," he stated. Elena looked up, pen still in her fingers. "Yesterday," Thomas stated, "your husband tried accessing trust records linked to your mother's name and your maiden name. The attempt got flagged. That's how Mr. Mitchell's firm realized things were escalating." Trust records? That meant Marcus wasn't just leaving her. He was hunting. Elena's mouth tightened into something almost composed. "He doesn't know what he's touching," she stated softly. As she stated it, her own device buzzed a new notification from an unknown number. Short and chilling. "Soon this ends." The wording was Marcus's even if the name wasn't there. Rachel glanced at the display, then at Elena. "It ends," Rachel stated, "but not the way he thinks." Somewhere, Marcus was already planning to make his version of the narrative official before the will reading, and the trust lawyers could make his actions official in a different way. The first email hit the display like a gunshot. Several long days passed between the night Elena signed the divorce papers and the next time she sat across from Sophie and Rachel in that same office. Days filled with medical checks, rest, and careful paperwork. Rachel insisted on it. "No war if your blood pressure is spiking." By the time Elena came back, the swelling on her cheek had faded, but the memory hadn't. Sophie's laptop chimed one small sound, huge meaning, and Rachel leaned in while Elena held her breath, hands pressed over her belly as if she could keep the twins composed by sheer will. The message wasn't a rumor. It wasn't a guess. It was a clean, cold trail of words. From Victoria Sterling to Marcus Bennett, subject, "Make her look unstable." Sophie clicked it open. Elena's abdomen tightened. The twins kicked as if they felt the danger in the atmosphere. For a second, she tasted the same metal she tasted the day Marcus struck her. Not because it was happening again, but because she could finally see it had been planned. The email text was short, strategic. Use the language we discussed. Concern, unpredictable, emotional strain on your career. Frame this as you trying to protect the corporation and your future. HR responds better to instability than to conflict. Sophie scrolled. More messages. Victoria telling Marcus exactly what to state, exactly when to state it. How to transform an expectant wife into a liability without sounding like a monster. Don't call her crazy. State you're worried about her judgment. Remind them she's been asking questions about capital. Make that sound impulsive, as if she doesn't comprehend stress. If you involve security, emphasize safety and tension at residence, not anger. It'll give you cover later. Victoria's language was polished, corporate, almost gentle. Use concern, use process, use HR, use documentation. Rachel's expression stayed composed, but her gaze sharpened. "This is coaching," she stated quietly. "Not an affair accident. This is orchestration." She weaponized corporate systems and your husband's ego. Elena stared at the display. She didn't cry. The tears had dried up somewhere around the time she realized she couldn't plead for dignity anymore. What she felt now was worse than sadness. She felt rewritten. They had been writing a narrative about her while she was living inside it. The investigation had moved faster than Marcus ever imagined because it didn't start from scratch. Catherine Monroe had set pieces in motion long before anyone comprehended why. Once Thomas handed his footage to Mr. Mitchell's holdings team, the trust lawyers filed emergency motions. The corporation's legal department received preservation notices and subpoenas. Compliance officers who had once listened politely to Victoria now had to turn over logs, backups, audit trails. Thomas placed a flash drive on Rachel's desk. Security footage from the residence in the avenue, he stated. Date stamped. Chain of custody documented. Sophie plugged it in. Video loaded. There was Victoria inside Elena's residence, moving through the hallway as if she had a key. There was Victoria stopping at the entrance to sign for a courier envelope. There was Victoria entering with correspondences in her hand. There was Victoria at the fireplace, her body blocking the camera for a second, then stepping aside while paper curled in the flames. Elena's throat tightened. She could almost smell the smoke again. Could almost hear her own heartbeat from that night on the lawn. Rachel didn't let the moment linger too long. Emotion was important. Strategy needed oxygen too. We don't react, Rachel stated. We build. Sophie clicked. Open bank records next. Figures moved across the display like a language of betrayal. Joint funds rerouted. Not once, not twice. Repeated transfers small enough to hide, frequent enough to bleed a family dry. Payment descriptions disguised as consulting, event support, executive hospitality. Sophie pointed at one line and stated, that account belongs to a holding corporation Victoria controls. The transfers line up with dates Marcus took her to private dinners and corporate trips he told you were mandatory. Elena's mind flashed to the cancelled cards, the you're overreacting arguments. The way Marcus acted as if she was demanding too much when she just desired groceries to clear. Now she comprehended they had needed her to look guilty so no one would question the cruelty. Rachel began building the folder digital and physical hard copies metadata chain of custody statements. Every document stamped and organized so it couldn't be dismissed as emotion. Elena watched the folder grow thicker and thicker. It felt strange seeing her pain transformed into evidence. It made the betrayal feel both more genuine and more survivable. At one point, Rachel looked at her and asked gently, "Are you okay to keep going? We can pause." Elena nodded once, because she couldn't afford to stop. Not with twins coming. Not with Marcus already investigating trust records. "Keep going," Elena stated softly. "I desire every piece." Rachel's next step wasn't court. It was timing. "They humiliated you in public," Rachel stated. "So the truth has to be seen too. Not whispered. Seen, but we choose where." Elena's torso tightened. Public meant facing gaze again. Cameras again. It meant standing in front of people who once watched her get erased. Rachel tapped a calendar on her desk. "The holdings lawyers have set a formal will reading," she explained. "Anyone named as heir, alternate, or interested party is required or strongly requested to attend. Because he was your spouse when your mother passed and because he tried to access trust records, Marcus is on the list. Victoria and the corporation's representatives have been notified as parties potentially involved in interference." Elena's brows pulled together. "Why would he agree to show up?" Rachel's voice stayed level. "Because he still thinks your mother was small town. He'll assume this is a minor will. He'll expect to use it as a stage to paint you as unstable. He won't be able to resist an audience," Thomas added. "And he won't know what's coming until the documents are read." So Marcus wasn't just harsh. He was greedy enough and arrogant enough to walk straight into an official space, holding evidence with his name all over it. Elena stared down at her hands. Her ring was gone now. Her wrist still had a faint bruise, but her mind felt clearer than it had in months. "They called me nothing," she stated. Sophie looked up. Elena's voice grew steadier. "So the folder will speak." Rachel nodded once. "Exactly." A week later, Marcus received a plain envelope from the holdings firm. He was in Victoria's office when he opened it. Victoria sitting behind her desk, heels crossed, expression composed but tighter than usual. He scanned the words and laughed. "She thinks this is a game," Marcus stated, waving the notice. "Will reading that's for rich people. Her mom was nobody. We'll go sit through the drama, make sure they know she's unstable and I'll walk out clean." "Nobody," he stated it as if he was proud of himself for believing it. "I'll shut it down," he added. "I'll tell them about the capital transfers, about how she's been." They had already signed the courthouse papers 2 days earlier. Nothing romantic, just a registry office, signatures, and an upgraded ring. Victoria didn't desire a big wedding yet. She desired documents that stated this new life was official. Victoria didn't laugh. She stared at the correspondence longer than necessary. Her fingers tightened slightly around her pen. The notice was from Harrison Mitchell, Trustee Council. It had words she comprehended all too well. Global trust, significant holdings, governance meeting, mandatory attendance, potential conflicts of interest to be addressed. Something had shifted in her gaze, something Marcus didn't notice because Marcus only noticed what fed him. "Victoria?" he asked. "You okay?" She forced a small smile. "Of course," she stated. "We'll handle it. Just be prepared to answer questions about your marriage. Stick to what we practiced." Her voice was steady. Her pulse was not. That night, alone in her apartment, Victoria opened her laptop and typed Catherine Monroe Rodriguez Global Trust. The loading circle spun. For a moment nothing happened. Then results began to appear slowly, selectively, as if the internet itself was deciding how much truth she deserved. Regulatory filings, philanthropic shells, old articles about a reclusive financial architect whose structures manage capital in the trillions for pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, global institutions always behind other names, other boards, other brands. Victoria's expression went still, not devastated the way normal people got devastated. Still the way predators got still when they realized the prey wasn't prey at all. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She closed the laptop slowly. For the first time, fear outweighed ambition. And in that same quiet moment, Marcus's device buzzed with another message from an acquaintance in HR. One that would push him to double down on his narrative just as the will reading was being locked into the calendar. "If you're separating from her, you should get ahead of this. People are talking. Document everything." Marcus smiled at the display. He had no idea documentation was exactly what would bury him. The entrance shut with a soft click that sounded louder than a slam. In that instant, Marcus Bennett felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Small, not because he was afraid of a will reading. He told himself he wasn't. He had walked into the building confident, shoulders back, wearing his best suit like armor. He told himself he was here to watch Elena fail one last time in public. That was the plan. He had even practiced the lines in his head. "I'm concerned about her stability. We're in the middle of a separation. I'm only here to answer questions." He imagined people nodding at him, whispering that he was brave for leaving her. He imagined Victoria Sterling smiling behind him, proud of how clean he made it. But the space didn't feel like a place where men like Marcus won. It felt like a place where truth lived in paper. The space was plain. No glamour, no stage lights, yet everything about it carried weight. The long conference surface, the thick folders, the quiet people in suits who didn't smile for approval, trustees, legal witnesses, representatives from the trust's audit committee, people who look as if they dealt with consequences for a living. Marcus's gaze scanned the space for Elena. He saw her a second later and he almost didn't recognize her. Elena Rodriguez walked in slowly, 8 months expectant with twins, but upright, not broken, not pleading. Her expression was composed, her hair neat, her expression controlled in a way Marcus had never truly comprehended. She moved like a woman who had already decided she would survive with or without anyone's permission. At her side was Rachel Foster, composed, prepared, a neat stack of folders at her seat. Rachel took a chair beside Elena as if she belonged at that surface. Because she did. Marcus's abdomen tightened. Why did Elena look prepared? He told himself it was fake. He told himself she was bluffing. He told himself she was still the same woman he struck and called a liability. Then he noticed something else. Victoria Sterling, once his superior. Now his new wife entered behind him. Heel's precise expression composed. But today her expression had a new layer. Tension. She sat near Marcus, not beside him. Close enough to be associated. Far enough to step away if needed. That detail should have warned him. But Marcus had always been slow to read anything that didn't feed his ego. At the front of the space sat Mr. Harrison Mitchell, the holdings and trust attorney, mid-50s. Composed voice, gaze that didn't flinch. He wasn't here to comfort anyone. His role was to execute Catherine Monroe's legal instructions exactly as written. Around him sat trustees and legal witnesses, people assigned to confirm the process was proper. Their job was to make the truth official. Mr. Mitchell opened a folder. "The holdings of Catherine Monroe will now be addressed," he stated evenly. "Please remember that this meeting is being audio recorded and certain sections will be transcribed into court filings if necessary." The space became quiet enough to hear breathing. Marcus sat back confident again for a moment. Catherine, Elena's small-town mother. He had decided she was nothing. This would be nothing. Mr. Mitchell began reading. Assets, foundations, holdings, corporations with names Marcus didn't recognize, layered through trusts and charitable vehicles. Figures that sounded almost unreal. Marcus's confidence began to wobble. Not from guilt. Marcus didn't do guilt easily, but from confusion. Why did this sound so big? He glanced at Victoria. She stared straight ahead, jaw tight, not blinking enough. Mr. Mitchell continued, voice steady. These holdings are managed through the Rodriguez Global Trust, he stated. Rodriguez? Marcus frowned. That was Elena's name now, but it had been her name before him too. He had never cared enough to ask why. He shifted in his seat. The figures kept climbing. Millions. Hundreds of millions, then billions. Marcus's mouth went dry. He tried to laugh under his breath just to remind himself he was still Marcus, still in control. No one joined him. Then Mr. Mitchell reached the line that cracked the space open like glass. And the sole heir to the Rodriguez Global Trust, valued at $10 billion as of the most recent audit, is Elena Rodriguez. That was the statement that made Marcus's hands start to shake. For a second Marcus laughed. One sharp burst. Then he stopped because no one else laughed, because the space didn't react as if it had heard a joke. Because Elena didn't even blink. Marcus's throat tightened and the laugh died in his mouth like something choking. 10 billion. His mind tried to reject it. It felt too large to hold, too absurd. He had called her dead weight. He had thrown her out. Victoria stood abruptly. Her chair scraped the floor loud in the silence. That's impossible, she stated, voice too sharp. She stopped herself because she almost stated nothing. And suddenly Victoria's composure broke just enough for everyone to see the crack. Mr. Mitchell raised a hand calmly, as if he'd dealt with disruption many times before. Miss Sterling, he stated, you will have an opportunity to respond. Sit down, please. It wasn't a suggestion. Victoria sat slowly. Mr. Mitchell continued. Multiple attempts were made to contact Miss Rodriguez, he stated, turning a page including a sealed correspondence delivered to her marital address. Our records show that correspondence was signed for by another adult at the residence and did not reach the intended recipient. Marcus swallowed hard. Mr. Mitchell's voice stayed even, but the space felt colder. Subsequently, he went on, our client's private investigator documented the destruction of holdings correspondence inside that residence. Destruction. Marcus's gaze flicked to Victoria. Victoria's expression drained. Mr. Mitchell nodded to a technician near the barrier. A monitor lit up. Footage. The video played silently. At first, the courier at the entrance. Victoria signing the envelope in her hand. Then Victoria at the fireplace, feeding paper into flames. Marcus's hands began to shake. He didn't desire to look at the display, but he couldn't stop. His body betrayed him the way he had betrayed Elena. Then emails appeared. Printed copies slid across the surface. Digital version mirrored on the monitor. Victoria coaching Marcus, telling him how to frame Elena as unstable, how to weaponize HR language, how to make a heavily expectant woman look dangerous instead of injured. Around him, witnesses shifted in their seats. Some expressions hardened, some brows lifted. People weren't whispering now. They were judging. And Marcus realized something terrifying. This space wasn't his audience. It was his trial. Elena stood slowly. She didn't slam her hands on the surface. She didn't scream. She didn't plead. She simply stood. Expectant, bruises, faint but not forgotten. Composed. When she spoke, her voice was quiet enough that people leaned in. I was called nothing, she stated. Silence. Her gaze moved to Marcus. You were right. She continued softly. Marcus's throat tightened. For the first time he desired to speak, not to attack but to stop whatever was coming. He had nothing. Elena's voice didn't rise. I was everything you couldn't see. And in that moment, Marcus comprehended the true cruelty of his own choice. He had abandoned a woman who was richer than anything he could ever become. But more than that, he had abandoned a woman who had been loyal. And loyalty, once broken, didn't return. A security officer from the trust's internal team stepped forward from the corner of the space. Professional firm, he approached Victoria. Miss Sterling, he stated quietly. You're required to remain available for further questioning. Corporation Counsel has been notified. You comprehend that? Victoria's gaze flicked to Marcus. Just one look. And she stepped back, not toward him, away from him, as if he was already sinking, as if she had just decided he wasn't worth saving. And Marcus, still shaking, suddenly realized the next public space wouldn't be a will reading. It would be a courtroom and he wouldn't be the one holding the microphone. The courtroom entrance opened and Marcus Bennett walked in like a man stepping into a storm he could no longer talk his way out of. His hands were still too still. His expression was tight, gaze red from nights without sleep. He wore a suit that used to make him feel powerful, but today it looked like a costume on a man who had lost his script. The space was packed not with cheering guests like the party where he humiliated Elena, but with people who didn't clap for cruelty, court staff, legal interns, a few corporate expressions from his old corporation there as silent observers. Even Diana Bennett, his mother, sat stiff and pale, her mouth pressed into a thin line as if she was trying to hold her pride inside her teeth. She was learning the hard way that a courtroom wasn't a living space. You couldn't bully the judge into agreeing with you. Elena Rodriguez entered next, still expectant, but closer to her due date now, walking carefully but with her head high. Her bruises were faint, but her composure was sharper than pain. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't trembling. She looked like a woman who had learned something sharp. Mercy is not owed to people who weaponize your silence. Rachel Foster walked beside her, composed and prepared, a stack of folders in her hands. Marcus's throat tightened when he saw those folders. Folders were truth, and truth was what he had been avoiding. The judge wasn't on a raised stage in this narrative. No dramatic movie speeches, no theatrical gavel slams. The judge's presence was felt through order and rules, through the way people stood when told, through the way voices lowered automatically. The courtroom didn't care about Marcus's ego. It cared about evidence. Marcus had already been fired. It happened fast after the will reading. His corporation's risk department moved first, followed by HR. His access badge stopped working. His inbox was frozen, pending internal review. Calls from his manager stopped. The official correspondence arrived a few days later. Employment terminated effective immediately, subject to ongoing investigation into serious policy violations. His allies vanished with the speed of trained animals. The same people who had laughed at his jokes stopped responding. The same executives who had watched Elena stand with assistants suddenly had urgent meetings they couldn't miss. Even Diana noticed that neighbors who once praised her successful son now averted their gaze at the grocery store. The humiliation he created had turned around and hunted him. And Marcus, for the first time, comprehended what it felt like to be erased. Rachel didn't waste time. She opened the first folder. She didn't speak like an angry woman. She spoke like a surgeon. "Your Honor," she stated calmly, "this matter involves financial manipulation within the marriage, domestic intimidation, attempted interference with holdings process, and coordinated reputational harm against my client while she was 8 months expectant with twins." Marcus flinched at the framing. Rachel presented the documents like bricks building a barrier Marcus couldn't climb. Sophie Parker's forensic reports showed the audit template accusing Elena of siphoning funds was created in Victoria's department, not by HR. Metadata, timestamps, user IDs. It wasn't someone could have, it was this is who did. Thomas's footage showed Victoria entering the residence, removing holdings correspondence, burning correspondence. Mitchell's correspondence logs showed delivery signature by V. Sterling, and no response from Elena. Bank records documented joint funds rerouted into accounts linked to Victoria's holding corporation. Text and email showed Victoria coaching Marcus word for word, how to frame Elena as unstable, how to use concern and safety as excuses, how to transform a public expulsion into a narrative where he looked like the victim. Even the night of the party had been prepared, security briefings, notes instructing them not to let Elena back inside if things got emotional, orders to escort her out if necessary. Marcus's lawyer tried to argue marital conflict, mixed messages, stress from pregnancy. Rachel didn't raise her voice. She simply turned another page and another. It was like watching a dam break but quietly. Elena sat beside Rachel, hands folded over her belly, gaze fixed ahead. She didn't look at Marcus. She didn't need to. She was done seeking his humanity. The judge listened. And when Marcus's lawyer finally paused, the judge spoke in a voice that made the whole space feel colder. The words were simple but the meaning was heavy. Temporary sole decision-making for Elena regarding medical and financial matters during the pregnancy. Protective orders limiting Marcus's contact. Restrictions on him coming near the marital residence or hospital without court permission. Orders freezing any attempt by Marcus to access holdings or trust records on Elena's behalf. Marcus's torso tightened. Custody-related restrictions meant he couldn't just show up and demand access to the babies when they were born. Everything would go through court. Financial restraints meant he couldn't grab at capital like a desperate man anymore. The judge didn't need to call him harsh. The law did it for him. Marcus stood too quickly as if standing could restore some of the power he lost. Your Honor, he started, voice cracking. She's turning everyone against me. I didn't know about the trust. I was misled, Victoria. He desired to explain. He desired to blame Victoria. He desired to state he was just under pressure. He desired to state he didn't know the correspondence was about billions. But the judge didn't let him finish. One raised hand, one firm interruption. This is not the venue to relitigate the trust. The judge stated, we are dealing with your conduct as a spouse and father. Sit down, Mr. Bennett. The courtroom didn't need Marcus's performance. It already had Marcus's pattern. Marcus sat down like a man being lowered into a grave of his own decisions. Diana's expression hardened beside him, but her gaze darted around the space. She was watching the assembly, watching who still looked at her with respect. And she was realizing something too. This time her authority couldn't override the truth. When the hearing ended, Marcus followed Elena out. His steps were fast, desperate, almost childlike. He pushed through the exit entrance as if fresh atmosphere could fix what the courtroom had sealed. Elena walked carefully down the steps. Rachel beside her, Thomas nearby like quiet protection. Marcus called her name. Elena, he stated, voice raw. Wait, please. The word please sounded wrong in his mouth, as if he'd borrowed it from someone kinder. Elena didn't stop. Marcus reached out, fingers stretching as if touching her sleeve could bring back the life he threw away. He didn't grab her. He knew cameras might be there, but the intention was still ugly. Possessive. Rachel shifted slightly, placing herself between them without drama. Elena finally spoke, but she didn't turn around. Her voice was composed, low, almost tired. You should have asked for my side, she stated. That was it. Not an insult, not a scream, just one statement that exposed everything Marcus had refused to do. Listen, Marcus swallowed hard. He desired to state he was sorry. He desired to state he didn't know. He desired to state he got swept up. But the truth was simple. He chose to believe lies because lies promised him status. Elena walked on and Marcus stood there watching the back of the woman he once called a liability. Now she was walking away with her future protected by law, and he was left holding nothing but his own shame. A few minutes later, when the assembly had thinned, Marcus looked around, searching for Victoria. She wasn't there. No heels clicking behind him. No cold hand guiding him, no confident smile, just absence. His device buzzed in his pocket. A single message from a number he knew too well. Victoria's. Don't contact me again. Handle your own mess. Marcus's blood went cold because in one line he comprehended the final betrayal. Victoria wasn't falling with him. She was leaving him behind. And somewhere Victoria was already making her next move. One that would decide whether she vanished quietly or got dragged into the light. The headline hit the displays like a final blow. Not Marcus's name. He was already finished. Not Diana's. She had retreated into silence. The name flashing everywhere was the one Marcus once treated like dirt. Heavily expectant woman struck and publicly dumped becomes sole heir to 10 billion Rodriguez Global Trust. Fraud probe targets executive superior underneath Elena Rodriguez. A photo followed Elena leaving the courthouse weeks earlier, chin lifted, one hand resting over her abdomen, Rachel Foster at her side like a shield. People online zoomed in on the faint bruise on the way she kept walking anyway. Comment sections filled with words that used to belong to other people, not to her. Air trust, fraud investigation, trillion-dollar structures. Elena saw none of it in real time. She was in a quiet hospital space, lights dim, holding two newborn babies against her torso. The twins were small, warm, and genuine in a way capital could never be. One of them curled a tiny fist around her finger like a promise. For a moment, the universe outside didn't matter. Then her device buzzed softly on the bedside surface. Rachel's name appeared. Elena didn't panic. Panic belonged to the old life, the one where Marcus controlled the narrative. She answered slowly, voice soft so she wouldn't wake the babies. Rachel sounded composed but satisfied. It's done, she stated. The final family court orders came through. You have sole legal authority for now. Protective measures stay in place. And Mr. Mitchell's team just confirmed the transfers. They've completed the holdings process. The trust distributions are now legally locked under your sole control. Locked. That word mattered because it meant Marcus couldn't claw at her future anymore, no matter how hungry he was. It meant Diana couldn't whisper her way into control. It meant Victoria couldn't use procedure and concern as weapons again. Elena's gaze closed briefly. She didn't feel joy the way people expected. She felt something quieter, release, like something heavy had finally been lifted off her ribs. She looked down at her babies and let herself breathe. You're safe, she thought. Not just to them, also to herself. Months later, Victoria Sterling resurfaced alone. No Marcus, no title, no protection. Her name appeared in corporate memos first, not gossip columns. Resignation accepted. Pending completion of internal review. Subject of ongoing investigation into misuse of position. Documents referred to regulators. The same system she once used to destroy. Elena's reputation turned cold and sharp against her. Corporation compliance officers who used to defer to her now interviewed her with recorders running. External regulators matched the trust's footage and Sophie's forensic reports with internal audit logs. The burned correspondence was ash, but the act of burning it wasn't not when video delivery records and email trails existed. Victoria did what opportunists always did when the ground cracked. She ran, not with a dramatic suitcase in the night, with lawyers, with carefully worded statements, with stepping away for personal reasons. She tried to slip away wearing a different name, a different brand, but evidence didn't care about branding. Thomas's footage didn't disappear because she deleted her social media. Sophie's financial trail didn't evaporate because she changed her device number. The emails, those polished, harsh instructions had been preserved on servers she couldn't control. Peers who once smiled at her stopped taking her calls. Entrance that opened easily before stayed shut. The silence around her became the loudest punishment. And somewhere in that silence, Victoria finally comprehended what Elena had learned earlier. Power built on cruelty always expires. Elena didn't post long threads online. She didn't subtweet. She didn't share screenshots. She didn't need to. When she finally stepped before cameras, it wasn't for drama. It was for closure. She stood with Rachel beside her and spoke clearly, slowly, so no one could twist her words. This isn't revenge, Elena stated. It's truth. Her voice didn't shake. The truth protects my children, she continued. And it protects other women who are told to stay quiet when they're being harmed. If you're watching this and you think staying silent makes you loyal, it doesn't. It makes other people comfortable. People listen not just because she was rich now, but because she was genuine. Because they'd seen the video of her being struck while expectant and the later footage of her walking into court with her head up. She finished simply. I won't discuss details beyond what's in the public record. The courts have spoken. The trust has spoken. I'm going back to my life. Then she stepped away from the microphones. No threats, no insults, no messy speeches, just a woman walking back to her life. Elena sat by a sunlit window months later, holding her twins in her arms. They'd grown. One grabbed at her necklace chain. The other slept with their tiny mouth open. The residence around her was different from Marcus's old residence. Not louder, not more glamorous, just hers. Secure, quiet. Papers with trust seals and investment summaries lay neatly in a compartment. Not on the surface. She didn't have to flaunt any of it. She didn't look hidden anymore. She didn't look small, not silent, not erased, unshaken. And somewhere far away, a man who once called her nothing sat in the echo of his own choices, realizing the worst kind of karma wasn't losing capital. He had remarried fast, chasing status in a new ring and a new wife. But even that second marriage couldn't protect him from the fallout of what he'd done. It was losing access to a woman who would have loved him honestly. Even after the cameras moved on, the truth stayed waiting quietly for the next person who thought loyalty was weakness. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. The narrator voice returns. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next video.